Hey everyone, it's Ivan, KidBadger.com, out here today, continuing the journey on building out Rifle 301 by Sawtooth Rifles. As I mentioned in the last video, we were kind of getting to the crux of the problem. I knew this was going to be kind of difficult. Reason being, Sidechick was originally made for a Remington 700 Action. So dimensionally, on a Remington 700 Action, it comes down, and then back here, it actually steps down. So the original top rail for the Sidechick steps down. This had to be addressed. Additionally, because it wasn't just that simple, but the whole pattern is different on this Gunwerks Action than a Remington 700 Action. So there were a couple hurdles in front of us. We started kind of trying to figure out, well, what about if we just don't use the top rail and maybe you just use the rail sections that actually come with this action? You could do that, but that's a bad idea. Reason being, this whole thing is made rigid and held together with the top rail, tying this forend with the chassis, creating something incredibly stable, strong, and light. So if you want, among other things, you can put a clip-on thermal, anything else out in front here. Basically, that top rail kind of brings it together, like the dude's rug. So we had to figure out how to make it work. What Matt did not want to do was reverse engineer this entire top rail. So I ended up giving my buddy, Adam, over at Q a call, said, hey, here's where we're at. What can we do? And long story short, talked to Adam, we both signed some NDAs, and we got the file for the top rail. My buddy Mitch sent it over. Once we had that, went ahead and started looking at how to kind of make it happen. So while that was stewing in the back of our mind, we went ahead and got started on some other projects. First up, we went ahead and got the trigger ready. Basically removing some of the parts that weren't needed on the trigger. While the trigger fits a standard 700 Action, it has basically the provision that lets you remove the bolt. Our Custom Action did not need that from Gunwerks, so went ahead and got rid of those parts without doing anything to actually disrupt the function of the trigger. Of course, nothing's easy, so when we went to go test fit this trigger, it basically made contact. It was not working as is, so had to figure something out. Initially tried milling it down, but it was pretty hard to get the trigger to basically stay affixed in the fixture, so it's time to do it by hand. Matt took it over to the grinder. After grinding it, we'll turn on the polisher. Boom, now had a custom fit trigger for this gun, hand finished. And since nothing's easy, one of the action screws was a little too long, so it had to go to the grinder too. At that point, decided to take a little break and maybe do something a little different. So went ahead and took a pretty sweet Benchmade, threw that thing up, got it laser engraved. Now it's super custom. Then, since there obviously was not enough already going on, Matt embarked on a little side quest, making a custom ARCA rail for Q-Cert handguards. If you're unfamiliar, ARCA rail is basically, it's a piece that fits into honestly a lot of tripods, and it allows you to, such as Roy Wright stuff, basically drop this straight in and shoot off of a tripod, which is incredibly handy if you're trying to make a shot from maybe an unconventional position or low, but not so low that you can use a bipod, or maybe even really high because you need to get up over something, brush, whatever it may be. ARCA rails basically allow you to drop in and lock the gun in place. Or for that matter, you can also slide them back and forth to include if you have a bipod that'll move on the ARCA rail. So one of the things Matt does at Sawtooth Rifles is makes ARCA rails for pretty much every major chassis out there for competitive shooting. And he's like, well, why don't we get you one for this gun? It's like, all right, let's do this. So he spent some time getting some measurements for the Q-cert and went ahead, got into it, wrote a program, went, then cut some stock over with the giant bandsaw. Next, that raw aluminum was put into the CNC milling machine. And a little while later, brand new custom ARCA rail came out. Things are pretty cool. As I mentioned, you can throw them up in a tripod and it will hold your gun securely. So securely you can shoot off of it if you have a good tripod. After the ARCA rail side quest, it was time to get back after Rifle 301, and the barrel was still a little bit shiny after being bead blasted. It was basically like a glass medium, and it was fairly stark contrast compared to the actual Gunwerks Action. So went ahead and took it over, made sure the caps were on there, it was all sealed up, and took it over and sandblasted the barrel. Being pleased with the way the barrel came out, it was time to throw it in the barrel vise so that we could torque the action on. That Gunwerks Action was then torqued to 110 foot-pounds. That is a lot. Matt, continuing to be meticulous, next tested the action on another piece of solder. Again, the piece of solder coming out at 3.3 thousandths. And then finally, cherry on top. I went ahead and torqued cherry bomb on to 30 foot-pounds. That, coupled with the tapers on the barrel, ensuring that one, it will not come off unless there is a lot of force, and also getting rid of any need for rock set. Next up, it was time to do some laser engraving. So once again, kind of put everything together, mocked it up, getting this handguard on there, and went through and basically marked all the spaces in the Q-cert, figuring that it would probably be best to go ahead and use these little windows to go ahead and laser engrave all the pertinent information on Rifle 301. With the spaces outlined, Matt then turned on the laser. Ended up laser engraving his logo. Pretty cool little logo with the Sawtooth Mountains. Then in the next space over, rifle number 301, as well as the twist rate of the barrel. And in the box next to that, the caliber, .243 Winchester. And finally, taking a custom rifle to the next level, my Kit Badger logo engraved right there, right in between the end of the handguard and the cherry bomb. Thing came out amazing. But here's the thing, even though we were able to complete a sweet side quest, we still had the crux, which was the top rail, which was not made for custom actions. So we had to figure this one out. Started kicking around ideas, and it was further complicated because the inside of this top rail, basically there's some hollow pockets, places where they don't need material for them to go onto a Remington 700. Again, different hole pattern for this, which means some of the places we were going to have to fix this so that it would go onto this action. There really wasn't any meat, or you would basically, to drill that hole, you would have a crescent moon that was open coming off of the hole that it was not looking good. And so we were kind of racking our brains, how can we make this thing work? So an idea that got floated. So I was like, what about if, I'm only a shade tree engineer, but what if we basically make a plate so that we can, I was telling him, I'm like, I don't even know if this is possible, but here's my idea. What if we basically mill out a pocket and then essentially machine a little plate that drops in there that actually has our screw holes? So we're essentially creating another larger surface area for our screws to grab onto and press down, and those in turn are going to push on a larger surface area because it's skeletonized underneath. And he's like, just might work. So he went after it on the computer, going over piece after piece, trying to figure out how to get this thing to work. Eventually writing a program to, one, actually mill out the pocket inside this rail, top rail on the rifle, or on the side chick rather. And in addition to that, another program to machine out these little essentially aluminum wafers that would drop down to include countersunk screws, because got pick rail going across so you can't come up above that. And then lastly, another program to remove the material back here and keep it at the same curvature so that it would fit onto this receiver. It was a tall order. Ready to action the plan, Matt went ahead and started cutting some aluminum stock, initially starting with the wafers. The first pass of the program in the machine went through and cut the wafers out, basically little puzzle pieces, to include the holes in the top as well as the screws, or the countersink rather, for the screws to drop into. Next, they were flipped over and all the other material was removed till we just had wafers. He ended up making 3 of them, just in case. Next, he went ahead and set up the rail inside the machine, knowing fortunately that we had 1 spare rail that I had Q-send out, but we didn't want to go there. First order of business was the machine to go through and cut those pockets out. After the pockets were cut, the rail was flipped over, and the real tricky part happened where the machine went through and actually cut the radius with a million little passes, essentially a ball-shaped bit, and eventually got that radius to match perfectly with the top of the action.
Yeah.
Right here is the regular rail, next to the one with the milled pocket. And finally, the wafers that drop in. And here's the bottom of the original rail for comparison to see the work that was done. I was and continue to be incredibly impressed with the work Matt did on this. The level of engineering and machining that went into this to make it work. So, last thing to be done was go ahead and assemble it. This gun, slick without an optic or anything, weighs in at 7 pounds, 2 ounces. Nice and light, handy, 17-inch barrel, collapsible stock, or folding stock rather, made for an intended role. Probably not gonna go shoot PRS. This is made for my son and I to go out and go hunting. Something easy for him to maneuver, carry, short relatively. So when I throw a silencer on there, it won't be overly long. Probably throw the Q Jumbo Shrimp on there, their 6.5 silencer. And yeah, I'm excited. Will this optic stay on there? Probably not, just because regardless of glass, magnification, reticle, anything like that, relatively heavy. Over 2 pounds with these rings. So I can probably find something lighter for my son to carry around, and probably a little better suited to the task of hunting. But I am super amazed and impressed with this gun. Rifle number 301 from Sawtooth Rifles. Matt did an outstanding job. I'm sure a bunch of you are like, so how's it shoot? I don't know. We're not at that part of the story yet. That's gonna be the next chapter. Fortunately, up where I live, one of my, honestly, kind of neighbors is Unknown Munitions. Really cool little company I am looking forward to working with and continuing to the next chapter of this rifle. What they do is actually load development, custom load development for your gun with your silent, like the way you are gonna shoot it, custom load development. And with that, custom loaded ammunition once they develop that perfect load for your rifle. So be sure to join me as I continue the journey of Rifle 301 and eventually get out there and put some rounds through it. But again, incredible work by Matt over there at Sawtooth Rifles, and looking forward to continuing this journey. But as always, thanks for joining us at kitbadger.com. Look forward to seeing you next time.